everybody, welcome to Lunchtime STEM. We are doing some more kitchen experiments today. Today we're doing something about density, and I have Daphne and Ronan back again to help me out with our experiments today. So we'll be doing a couple of different experiments. You can do these along with us, or you can do them separately, or just do one. But both are going to be related to density. And both of them have brought something with them today that we will be using to talk about density in a second. So density, do you guys know what that is?
It's like heaviness, I guess.
Heaviness is definitely a part of density.
It's also like how much, like how like light or heavy, yeah.
So weight's an important part of density. Mm-hmm. So can you guys put your guys up on the table, and what are these?
These are squishmallows. This is Ziggy.
And is it heavy or light?
It's pretty light because it's basically just a stuffed animal but with a little more stuff, but it's pretty heavy compared to like your normal stuffed bear stuff.
Because it's big, right?
Yeah, also because it has a lot of stuff in it.
But it's like a pillow, yeah. Right? So pillows are pretty light. These are the same size, more or less, right? So let's say Ronan's Squishmallow is just like it is. And Daphne, what if I told you that your Squishmallow, instead of being filled with pillow material, was filled with rocks?
Well, yeah, denser.
Well, do you think you'd be even able to like pick it up?
Probably not.
It'd be pretty heavy,
It'd
right?
It'd be really heavy.
So their size would still be the same as each other, but the weight has changed. And that's really what density is all about. So density is weight in relation to volume. So it's just a ratio. So when we're talking about density, the easiest way to measure it is to make sure that the volume is constant when we're working with liquids like we will be today. Or if we look at things of the same weight, then we can see how their volume is different, and then that gives us some clues about density as well. So our first experiment today, we're going to be making a density column, and that's going to involve several different liquids that you might find in your house, and we're going to create a cylinder of them, and then that will be used to test the density of some other objects that we have lying around that are solids. Cool. All right, let's get started. So let's look at some of the ingredients and supplies that we're going to need to do our density column today. The first thing you're going to need is a container to put it all in. We're going to use a pitcher that we had. You're trying to find something that is cylindrical. Narrow is good too. So you could use something like a glass, then you can use less of each substance. But we're going to put it in this nice tall glass pitcher just because it should be easy to see. A vase might also work well, or plasticware, as long as you can see into it, so you can see the different layers once we make them. Once you have your pitcher, you're also going to need several small containers that are of the same size. So we're using plastic cups to put the different ingredients in to measure them out. Because density has to do with volume and weight, we want to make sure that the volume is the same for all of the things that we are going to use from the house. So having the same size cup lets us evenly measure everything out. You can also use a measuring cup or a kitchen scale to make your measurements for the initial one as well. You're going to want several things from around the house. I would say between 5 to 9 different items that you can use to make the layers. Dish soap works really well. It can be anything that you would use in your kitchen. Dawn, the color doesn't matter. You can pick whatever kind you have at home. Light corn syrup or Caro syrup. Tap water. We're also going to use some vegetable oil. Honey works really well as a base layer. You can use baby oil, rubbing alcohol, maple syrup, vinegar, milk, and we have whole milk. That's important. Whole milk is more dense than skim milk, so that creates a more clear layer from water. We also want to have some food coloring. This is optional, but it does make each layer look a little bit more clear. So we've got 4 different colors, primary colors, and we can make other colors with those if we need to. Again, that's optional. It just makes your layers easier to see. So we're going to go ahead and transfer the ingredients that we're using into individual cups. Daphne already put water into this cup, so we've got 3/4 of a cup of water in here. You don't have to use 3/4 of a cup, just judge it based on how big your container is. We have a pretty large container to fill up, so we went with a pretty large volume of water. If you were doing something smaller like a glass, you would use a much smaller amount. So water is one of the things that we can dye with our food coloring so that we can see it a little bit more clearly. So I'm going to have Ronan put some red food coloring in. Make sure you ask a grown-up before you use any food coloring. I think that's good. Let's give it a stir. Give that a stir, Ronan. Because food coloring can be really messy and it can stain your hands, your clothes, it can stain a tablecloth. So for this part of the experiment, if you are using food coloring, talk to your grown-up first and make sure you're wearing clothes that you don't mind getting a little bit messy. So we've dyed our water a nice red color. That'll make it easier to see. And we're going to go ahead and set up some of our other items and do the food coloring before we transfer them all into the vessel for you. We'll get that done using basters. So that's another item you might want to have on hand. And then we also have a spoon just to stir things as we use the food coloring. Okay, so should we put things into the cups and get them ready to put into our big cylinder? So we've put all of our ingredients into the cups and we added some food coloring to some of them. The milk, we made a purple color. The water, we did red. And then the rubbing alcohol, we did green. That should let us see our layers a little bit better. And then we ordered our items by their specific density. So we've got our honey being our most dense, and you can probably tell that when you squeeze it into your container because it's very, very thick. It's viscous. Then the Caro syrup would be next, and corn syrup is also really, really thick and viscous, and you can tell that when you're pouring it into the container. Milk, which if you drink milk, you know, seems a little thicker than water when you're drinking it. Dish soap, our water. Then we've got our vegetable oil, and then our rubbing alcohol. And you can think about vegetable oil with density because sometimes you might have a salad dressing and the oil ends up on top of the salad dressing and you have to shake it before you end up using it on your salad. And that's because the oil is less dense than the vinegar and the other ingredients, and so it sits on top of it. So now we're going to start transferring all of these ingredients into our cylinder. So we're going to clear some of these items out of the way just so that you can see a little bit better. And if you're using anything different than the items that we picked, you can find densities for everything online. we start transferring things, we're going to start with the most dense item first. And one thing that you'll notice, let's see. So Ronan, can you pick up, here, let me try this and this. Can you pick up the honey and then pick up the water and tell me which one is heavier?
This one.
The honey. Yeah. So you can also kind of figure out density in that way. The honey feels a lot heavier than rubbing alcohol, for example. So we're going to transfer this into our container. And with the honey, it's the first thing in, so we don't need to be neat about it. We're just going to pour it on in. We'll try to get as much of it in there as we can. It's going to dribble for a bit because it's very, very thick and very viscous. Once we've got most of it in there, we're probably in good shape to move on to our next ingredient. We're going to really try to avoid getting any on the sides of the cylinder though, because that will affect our other things as we go in, and we're going to need the sides later when we're working with our less dense items. And then Daphne, do you want to put the Caro syrup on top of the honey, and you just try to aim for the middle of it. And it's okay if they intermix a little bit. They will sort themselves out. This one's also going to take a little time to pour because it's really sticky. Okay, and then you can just stack that cup in that one. And you can't see it too well yet. There is a color change. The honey is darker and it's on the bottom. That's going to get more pronounced as we go. It's going to take a little time for it to settle, but it'll work. Now, once we get to our milk, which is not nearly as thick and sticky as the Caro or the honey is, we're going to start using a baster to put it in. Again, we're going to try to avoid getting it on the sides. And you know what? I'm actually going to do a little bit less than that at a time, just so this isn't quite as messy. So we're trying to just sort of dribble it in there. I'll move that a little bit so you can see. So can one of you guys kind of describe what you're seeing here?
It's like getting a purple puddle on top of.
Yeah, it's kind of on top of what we already put in there, right?
It's not really.
So we want to do it pretty slowly. I got it a little bit too fast there.
Yeah, it's going like a lake. So.
But the slower we do it, the nicer our layers are going to be. Again, we're going to try to avoid getting it on the side of our container because we're going to need those sides in a bit when we do some of the lighter liquids. So again, we're just going to kind of dribble it in there. All right, can you put that in there? And then, Daphne, do you mind going to rinse that out real quick? Let's take a look at this. Ronan, do you mind going to get a paper towel and we'll try to get some of the dribbles off just so it's a little bit prettier.
Sure.
So we've got 3 good layers so far. We've got our dark honey on the bottom. We've got our kind of sparkly looking, very, very pale Caro syrup, and then we've got our purple milk on top of that. And we're gonna try to get some of these dribbles that I made off of here. Okay, so we brought this up closer to the camera so that you can see it a little bit better. We're finished with the milk, and so we're gonna start with the dish soap. And again, we're gonna just barely dribble it in there and try to avoid hitting the sides. Can you guys describe what you're seeing?
Yeah, kind of like the same thing that the milk did. It's making a pool, except that one
It's
has
mixing a little bit more.
yeah, it has more. It's getting spread out faster.
It should end up on top, but we have to put it in pretty slowly. Try to distribute that around a little bit more evenly. Okay, so now we've got our Dawn in there, we've got our milk, we have our carob syrup, and we have our honey at the very bottom. If I gently pick this up, you can hopefully see all of the layers. And we're gonna add our water now. And Ronan's gonna help me with this, so I'm gonna do the first little bit and then he's gonna go after that. So we're, from this point on, from the water on, we are going to use the side, and because ours has this little lip, because it's a pitcher, that's gonna be probably the easiest way for us to run the water in. And then I'm gonna let Ronan take over from here. We'll come back when we've got all the water in. Okay, so did you see how I did it?
Yeah.
Don't squeeze.
Very gently.
Okay, and just, yeah, slowly tip. Yep, just tip it up a little bit.
I got it.
Good. Okay, so we got all the water in there. So now we've got 5 layers: water, Dawn, milk, carob syrup, and honey at the bottom. Now we're gonna put in our vegetable oil. And again, we're gonna just kind of try to lightly run it down the side. We did learn on the last layer that we need to go slowly and not tip the container very much, because it did make the Dawn and milk layer a little lopsided. You can probably see that. The oil's going in a little easier than the water.
You can't really see it from the top. From the top, it just looks like the water.
But can you see it from the side?
Yeah, from the
It's
side, it
perfect
looks
from the
totally different.
Looks like glass.
From the top, it's like you can't even tell it's oil.
And some of the layers should settle again once the container's stationary for a while. So between the pours. Here I went a little bit too fast again. We've almost got all of our oil in. If you look, we've got all but one of our layers done. We've got our honey, carob syrup, milk, Dawn. We've got water, and then our vegetable oil. So the last thing left is our rubbing alcohol that we dyed this nice green color so we can see it. And Daphne's gonna go ahead and put that into the cylinder. And again, she's just gonna run it down the side like we have since we hit the water layer. So let's pick up the, so do like that, yep.
You can kind of see it bobbing now.
So what does it look like from your angle, Ronan?
It looks like it's the. This is going on forever, and there's like big bubbles popping.
But it's more or less sitting on top, right?
It looks like it's.
Make sure it's in the glass.
Yeah, it just looks like just things outside of the glass.
Okay, we'll come back in a second once that's all in and go to the next part of our
It
experiment.
is juicy.
So we've got all of our layers into our cylinder now. We've got our honey on the very bottom, then our caro syrup, our purple milk, our blue Dawn soap, the water that we dyed red, our vegetable oil, and then finally our green rubbing alcohol. And hopefully you can see all of the layers through there. One of the reasons that we made this density column is that it can act sort of like a thermometer, but instead of checking the temperature of something, it's able to give you the relative density of something. So we've brought a lot of little items to test today. Daphne, what do you have?
I have a little helicopter leaf, piece of styrofoam, and a peanut.
And I have a rock and a plastic anchor for a screw from a wall.
I have a big screw, and a tiny screw, and a spike ball, and a piece of chocolate.
So you can use any items for this, inside or out. We have a mix of things that we found outside, like seed pods, and things that were inside, like screws or chocolate. But you can use anything. Just make sure you ask your grown-up permission before you use anything from your house, because whatever we put into our density column is going to get sticky or at a minimum wet. So we want to make sure that these are things that your grown-up is okay with going into our cylinder. So we will try to test out some of these objects. Do you guys have any theories about what you have that would be the heaviest?
Yes. I think this big bolt would probably be heavier than any of these, because this is hollow, and the chocolate is just a piece of chocolate.
So do you think, we can show the screws here. They're about the same length, but this one is thicker. So do you think that their density will be the same, or do you think it'll be different?
I think they'll be different, but I don't know which. I think this one should be bigger.
And I think my rock is going to be the most dense.
Yeah.
How about you, Daphne? What do you think?
The styrofoam is gonna be the lightest, then it's gonna be the seed, and then it's gonna be the peanut.
Okay, well, let's start with something. Ronan, what do you want to try first?
I want to try chocolate.
So you dropped your chocolate in. Can you see where it landed?
No.
I think it's on the red layer.
Yeah, Daphne, I think it's on your side somewhere. So we'll take a peek at that once we have everything in, but it's somewhere in the middle, right?
Yeah.
It definitely didn't get all the way down to the bottom. Okay. Do you want to try something? So she dropped her peanut in.
Can't see that one either.
I think it's also in the middle layers somewhere. I'm gonna try my rock.
Oh, I see the piece of chocolate.
Oh, where is it?
I think I see it. It's right there, I think.
Which layer is it in?
Maybe that's just a bubble, but it's like right. It's like in the middle of the milk and the syrup. You can kind of see
Okay.
it like peeking out.
I'm gonna try my rock. Where do you guys think this will end up?
I think
I
it'll
think
probably end
one
up
of the
in the
bottom
honey,
ones.
this, or the milk.
Okay. So in
Yeah,
goes
go with
my
the
rock.
brown syrup.
And
Honey.
yeah,
honey.
straight to the bottom there.
Okay, I'm gonna try the ball.
Well,
It's it'll sink.
definitely more dense than the rubbing alcohol, right? It's not floating on top.
It's just hollow, so it'll.
So it's less dense than the oil because it's sitting kind of in between those two layers.
Yeah.
Right? Okay, Ronan, you want to try something else?
No.
Daphne, you want to try another? You're doing your helicopter seed. And
Top layer.
so the little like wing
there.
part seems to be floating on top of the alcohol, but the actual seed part
Is more in
sitting
the
on top
alcohol.
of the oil. So it sunk a little bit. I will try my little plastic anchor. And this is hollow. So we'll see if it fills up
But
with
it has
anything.
a cylinder, so it should go a little farther.
I think it's in this.
It is
layer.
sinking into the Dawn, and actually it's still going.
Slowly going
Oh,
down.
it
down.
Probably
It
because
is in between the Dawn and the milk, it looks like, and it's kind of poking into
The oil.
the caro syrup. So it's roughly about as dense as the milk, it looks like. It's kind of settled. Let's see if you can see that. Sort of settled horizontally in our milk layer there.
If you look, you can see the chocolate peeking down. If you like go from the top, you can see it. It's like right around there.
Okay. And Ronan, go ahead and drop one of your screws. Is that the skinny or the?
skinny. I
And
dropped
it already went straight down to the bottom.
I hit it on top of the helicopter seat.
So that kind of created an interesting.
It
Whoa,
moved this
that looks
a
so
lot.
cool.
It took some of the caro syrup down into the honey with it. It makes like
It
little
also
strings.
pushed the little spike
You
ball.
want to try your styrofoam?
I think this one's gonna float.
And it did. So it floated on top of the rubbing alcohol. So that's the only thing that's been less
This
dense
one,
than the rubbing alcohol.
I think, is probably just gonna sink
Sink.
all the way. Yep.
And it did.
That did was much
That went
faster.
straight down, and it hit my little anchor piece on the way, but that floated back up.
Look,
So
there's this weird like stream.
okay, so what did we end up with? We had our styrofoam was the least dense.
Then,
Our seed pod was in between
Yeah.
that.
then
And the pokey seed pod was
a
a
little,
little bit more.
These are
And that
a few
has
things
sunk a
in
little,
there.
I think, because it has holes in it
And
that
then
have
the
filled
peanut,
in with the
You
liquid,
can
right?
see the peanut right there.
The peanut is, yes,
Oh,
the
I see it
peanut
now.
is sitting over here.
Chocolate is down there.
Then we had, the chocolate.
If you
Oh.
really look, you can see it poking down
Next.
right there.
Oh, so the chocolate was even more so, and my anchor is kind of sitting in the milk. So the chocolate and the anchor were sort of similar. And then at the very bottom, we've got our rock and both of our screws, which were more dense than anything that we had
But
in
the big
our
screw just went
cylinder.
plop.
It did go down faster, didn't it?
Yeah, much faster than any of the other ones.
So you can see how you can use your density column to sort of measure the density of unknown objects. And if you made your density column in something like a mason jar or something with a lid on it, you can actually keep it if you like. They're kind of pretty in the light if you stick them in a window, at least for a little while. Now, if you use milk, you might not want to keep it too long, but it is an interesting experiment that you can keep around at least for a little while to show other people in your family and maybe try some different objects over time.